Hello, my name is Jorb. I love gear. This little guy is the Teenage Engineering P080 Record Factory. It's a compact record player, but more excitingly, it's a compact record cutter. You could put these blank 5-inch discs in the machine, send audio into it, and cut your very own records.
Used to the sound of the Teenage Engineering P080 Record Factory. It's marketed sort of as a toy, sort of not, and I think it's almost useless.
It kind of sucks. First off, I bought this with my own money because if it does even a halfway decent job at the price, it's a really cool thing to be able to cut your own records for less than $200. Also, very important to get out of the way before we say anything else, this is totally a toy. Teenage Engineering doesn't explicitly say that it's a toy in really any of the marketing, but the marketing does include children, and the product page says that it's not intended for children under 12, but we do have one very convincing place where the hardware is described as a toy. In a, let's say, streetwear designer world style collaboration, the Record Factory is Teenage Engineering rebranding in existing product. A company called Gakin makes the toy record maker kit, which, just like the Teenage Engineering one here, is labeled as a collaboration with the Japanese designer Yuri Suzuki. And this was pointed out on Twitter right after the announcement, almost immediately. And then after that, I saw my good buddy Simon the Magpie, who you should scroll down a bit into the description, hit subscribe, and then click on the link to Simon's video. Tell him he did such a nice job. But he right away did a video saying this is exactly like the Gakin toy record maker. And to be clear, that's not something I'm mad about. I think it's cool that companies want to work with designers or individuals or other companies that they like. Collaborations are great and they matter a lot in the music world. So I'm glad that the music instrument world participates in it as well. But credit where credit's due, right? So let's think of Teenage Engineering more as the publisher here. And not the designer of anything. Anyway, the Record Factory comes as a kit. It's several loose bags of parts, and putting it together isn't hard per se, but it takes a lot of steps, and it leaves a lot of opportunities to make small and very frustrating mistakes. And so I built it without much trouble. I had to go back a few times. I had to change a few things. I don't want to show you all of that because I don't want this to be too long. But the first thing I checked when it was assembled was how well does this play records that were produced in a proper factory, not by this in itself. Find out if this is a good record player at all. And it's not. I tried a very beat up 45 that I tore out of an old jukebox. A single from a band called The Arcs, which was, this is a modern production record, and a live single from a band called Luthi. And all of those records skipped. Some worse than others. The Arcs record was horrible. Low end makes it skip really, really badly.
Does anybody else skip this bad?
But none of them made it through without skipping at all. And I was like, well, maybe I set this up wrong, or maybe I configured it wrong, but that's not that big of a deal. I really want this to be a record cutter, right? It doesn't matter if it sucks as a player, because that's not why I bought it. And if you want a cheap record player, you can go to Target and get a Crosley Cruiser. And if it's bad, it's going to be a little bad. And you're not going to be surprised if it kind of sucks, right? It's not worth getting worked up about. But I really bought this as a record cutter, okay? And if this is the exact same as the Gakin one, it might be the only one that's available at this price point, at least on the market. So is it any good as a record cutter? Not really. I tried several different sound sources with different setups of the record cutter. You can kind of control the depth separately from the gain, I guess, of what you're putting into it. And I had some success finding a sweet spot. Really, of the cutting depth was the hardest thing for me. But with the volume adjusted to fit the sound source, the only things that never skipped had so much noise in the signal that it was almost like a complete waste of time. And anything with enough volume or low end to be fun to put on a record, without losing so much of it and not sounding horribly tinny, it skipped really, really badly. I did have improvements for playback when I put it on my nicer turntable, an Audio-Technica LP120, but I legitimately feel like the rough cut grooves are bad for my needles, bad for my cartridges, and I need that to DJ. So I'm not going to spin them on there for too long. But really, I wanted this video to be more. I wanted to give good examples of how you could use this, include sound examples of all the sound sources, and talk about, you know, what settings might work for a synthesizer versus drum samples versus a whole beat. But it's not worth it. I could go on about edge cases where this is useful, or enough specific setup stuff where this ends up being fun, but it wasn't worth it. And I spent so much time trying to get things to work right that I felt in the end that I was wasting my time even trying to get it to work better. So even the best results are so low fidelity, and the pitch is inconsistent, and there's so much background noise. That I can't really imagine them, these record factories, being useful for anything other than characterful samples, if you actually want to use it as like part of your audio processing, or the novelty of making a little record. And I might still use it for that. One of the things I want to do with this is make fun little novelty records as merch when I play live. I think that would be a cool thing to sell for $10 or whatever as a band. Here's the worst quality record you could possibly buy, but it's our music, and you can buy it here and now. I do think it's valuable for things like that, for the novelty of that. So really, yes, back to it like being used in the studio. It took so much precise, finicky setup to get it to work well that it's not even fun anymore, which is the one thing that I think this product really could be. It is a toy, after all. And I don't want to say that processing something in outdated media is useless. I really like to do that, and it can be characterful and interesting, and there's reasons to do it. But I don't think there's reasons to do it with this. I can't think of hardly any reason, unless you very, very specifically are curious about vinyl, to use this as a sound processor over a microcassette player or a cassette deck or a reel-to-reel. If you're just like, oh, you know what? I want to mess around with physical media, you can solve almost all of the problems of this for less money, with similar results, with medium that you can record to more than one time that doesn't make a mess when you use it, if you just buy a cassette deck. So that's really it. I don't like being negative, and this is negative. And I will say one more time, at some point I will use this to make fun novelty merch. Tiny little records that sound really bad, but it is our music when I play live or when we play live. I think that is a really, really good use for this. And it'll just take a lot of setup, and they're going to skip, and they're not going to be perfect. But for anything else, it's too much setup. It's too much worry, and it ends up being too low fidelity to be useful and too finicky to be any fun. So there you go. I don't like being negative, but that is the entire experience I had with this thing. It wasn't fun, it wasn't easy to use, and I didn't get anything that good out of it. So I'm not recording any extra sound examples. Anything you have is just what I had. I'm so done with this product. Appreciate you watching. My name's Jorb. I love gear. See you in the next one. Cheers and so long.